Hello, everybody. Good morning. I hope you had a good evening yesterday and you had a good night's sleep and you're filled with energy today because we will start the morning with an awesome presentation from our family speaker to say, because he's joining us since many years now, always with a very good presentation. So it's my pleasure to welcome Sebastian Avarvarei. And you can give him a round of applause, please. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, good morning. I actually hope you didn't had a very long night. I hope you went out partying last night. That's what you're supposed to do at conferences, and then get the first talk in the morning to wake you up, which is what I'm going to try to do today. And so let's get quickly started. First half an hour about myself. Oh, just kidding. I'm Sebastian Avarvarei. I've been working in IT and security for, well, actually a little bit longer than 20 years, but let's call it 20 for now. I've been starting on the technical side, on the in software development, then moving into security. But over time, I got more and more interested into the more boring side of things like management, governance, efficiency, and of course, I'm a big fan of learning from my mistakes, and obviously I had a lot of learning opportunities. That's how you end up being here in the presentations. And by the way, it's a bit of a new setup for me. Usually I have one of those mics on my, so I can keep my hands free. And I was laughing, like, we're Romanians, like Italians. You give me something to hold, you just kill half of my communication channel. But I'll try to manage. Right. So, what are we going to talk about today? Processes. And yes, processes. We all have processes everywhere. And they are the foundation of pretty much every company. And everything you want to do in a big organization has to be in a process. And we want to have more and more and more processes. You cannot move something in a company if you don't follow a process typically. And yeah, this is what keeps the companies going round and round. However, when I look at many companies today, those going round and round processes look a little bit like this. And why do we need to talk about this? Because there is a way out. And this is what I'm going to try to do today, to give you a few techniques and to give you some ideas about, first of all, how to identify the problem processes, how to see what is wrong with them, and how to start fixing them. And I'm going to do that by using some techniques that actually have been around for decades. However, they have been around for decades on the business side. And this is something that I keep repeating in many of the talks that I give. We need to start learning more from the business. I mean, these guys have been around for much longer than we as cybersecurity. They've been learning how to do things efficiently for decades. Why don't we learn that? Especially nowadays when you hear so many companies doing headcount reduction, you might be losing people from your security teams. Learning how to do more with less might be a good idea and might be a good way to save your job. You never know. But really, it's quite important to see how can we do it better. I haven't met yet a company which says, I have enough security people. Have you? If there is such a company and you're hiring, let me know. But no, seriously, there is no company that has enough security people, and there's always more problems that need to be solving. And how do we solve those problems? Yeah, usually with processes. And yeah, our processes are pretty much our love language, even for us in security. Like, what do we want to do? We want to review things. We want to approve or reject things. Now, of course, when you see something not right, denied. But everything goes in the processes. And I'm talking about those processes where you keep getting to your security teams ticket after ticket, review requests, demands, code reviews. It goes on and on and on, and it gets you very busy. And they do have a positive side, don't get me wrong. Processes are important. They give us that structure and predictability of we know what's coming down the pipe. We can get a grapple of things. However, we tend to get lost in it because we have so many tickets and requests, and as I said, we get lost in how many things we have to solve in a day that we don't have time to actually think. We do not have time, and we do not make time to ask, why are we doing it this way? What is the risk that we are actually reducing as a security team by being part of those processes? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And this is something that I use as a mantra over and over again. What is the problem we're solving? For everything that we do, we should be able to answer that question. This is the problem we're solving. This is the risk we're reducing. This is why we are doing it. And I was at another conference recently, and I asked the audience, guys, what do you think? Are you involved in too many or too few processes? And it was about 3/4 of the audience said, yeah, we're definitely swamped with too many processes. I don't know, what's the case here? Let's do a quick show of hands. Who thinks that we are involved in too many processes as security? Okay, that's more 50-50. Okay, we're doing good, but we can do better. So where do we start? First of all, we start by finding the problem. So what are, by the way, sorry for the timer there. The title is The 4 Horsemen of the Processes Apocalypse. This is something that you will find very useful. There are 4 red flags, easy to remember, that will help you to first identify what are the processes that are a problem and should be good candidates for optimization. The first one, which is the bane of my existence. When you go to somebody and you ask, why are we doing this process? Why are we doing it this way? Don't know. This is how we've been doing it. And it's like folklore. Like, you know, people come and go and you just lose the reason why. It just becomes, yeah, we've always done it like this. This is how we should be doing it. No. The second big red flag. So why are you in that process? I'm asking security colleague or security team, why are you part of that process? Why are you an approver in that process? Well, we just want to see what's going on. It's amazing how many times I see that. And I'll go into each of those in a bit more detail to see what does it mean, what's the problem, and how to solve it. But yeah, the process is where you are part of it just in case. The third one, processes where you never reject. So if you have a process where everything is approved all the time, that should give you pause. And the fourth one, another of my favorite, the processes where you as security team are doing some administrative task, you're just checking, have they filled in the right TPS form? For those who remember the Office Space movie. Have you used the right form? Have you filled in the right fields? Is that really security work? Spoiler alert, it's not. And, okay, so, of course, there are more problems, but start with these 4. These are 4 easy to see signs. And let's dig a little bit into each one. So the first one with, we've always done it this way. Again, it's a red flag because it means we don't know why. We don't know what's the problem we're solving. And not only it's inefficient, but it's actually dangerous. Because it gives you a false sense of security. Because you keep doing something and you think you're improving security. You think you're providing a security service to your company, but you're not. No, you're just following tradition. You're not doing security work. And it's also a sign that it might be a process that was designed ages ago. Well, in security terms, that's about 2 years ago, when the threat landscape might have looked very different. So it might be a process that it might not solve today's problems. And in terms of how to solve this, the remediation, of course, and again, each of these points, I'll dig deeper and deeper, but in principle, you're looking at doing process redesign, you're looking at challenging whatever assumptions do you have in that process, and remember what assumption stands for, the first three letters, and you want to focus on the responsibilities. Not only why are we in that process, but what are the other people in that process doing? The second one that I mentioned, the second red flag, which is processes where we as security team are in there just to see what's happening. And I've seen quite a few cases. I dealt with one recently when I realized in one of the teams that I'm working with that the security team was doing security reviews both in the privacy impact assessment phase and then in the project analysis. And I'm like, hold on, this is duplicate work. Why do you do it? Well, we want to be in the privacy impact assessment process just to make sure that we see all the projects that are coming in and so we can make sure that they do come for the proper security review later. Right, so you're wasting days in a month doing something just to see what's happening. Interesting. First of all, being part of such a process just to see what's going on as a security team, it's a major waste of resources. But more worryingly, it's a signal that you have a governance problem. You're actually trying to compensate for a risk that should be solved in a very different way. So you're trying to solve the fact that there is a lack of governance that might allow certain processes or certain projects to bypass security. And instead of fixing the governance problem, you're just embedding yourself in some other process just in case. You can't afford to do that. Not today. And these are the processes you definitely should be looking to get out of. I'll show you how to get out of those processes. And there are alternatives way to do it. So if you just want to see what's happening, get some reports, create some automation from audit logs on the technical side. There are ways to do it that take only a fraction of the time that would take you with you being in that process. And then comes the rubber stamper. That's the third major red flag. And an example of this is sometimes you see security teams approving when somebody needs an account in a certain system, or they need admin access to something. Yeah, some of them do need like global domain admin. Yeah, you might want to have that one approved by security. But for the majority of the requests, do you know the person? Do you know who they are? What's their job? On the other side, do you know the servers? Like, typical company, you have thousands of servers and applications. How do you know who's supposed to get access to what? So you're just doing it as a rubber stamp just to give the false sense of security. Yes, we checked. What did you actually check? You don't have the information needed to do a proper check. Of course, it's not always wrong. So sometimes there are companies which are so well organized that yes, all the requests are perfectly prepared, they make sense, they follow the policies, and all of them get approved. Haven't seen one of those, but they're supposed to exist somewhere. But really, in most cases, it should give you pause. And processes like that are a sure sign also that the responsibility is a bit diluted. So instead of the requester having the ownership and the responsibility, they kind of pass it on to security. Why? Do your own job. So yeah, in situations like this, check your assumptions, check if you even have the information needed to take the decision that you're supposed to take as security in that process, and get out if you can. And then the fourth one, the bane of my existence with many of the security teams that I've been working with, where you're just checking non-security stuff. And there is a very nice concept in the business, which is called do only what you can do. So if you're security, that means any work that you do has to be security work. Don't waste your time. The company is not paying the pretty sizable rates for security people to do administrative work. If you're just checking forms, if you're checking have they filled in all the fields, no, that's not security work. Again, get out, help in structuring the requirements, put in some automation in place. Focus only what is real, actual security work. Do not do administrative work. Let somebody else in the company who has the right skill set do it, because you can do other people's job for the administrative part. Nobody else can do your job as security. So let's see, how does this look a little bit towards the practice? So let's say you have, I'm just taking a theoretical example. This is a hypothetical process. You are part of that process, and of course you can be a step, you can be an approver in that process, or you might need to do something, and you have to really think every time when you find yourself as a security team in a process, do I need to be there? And it's about the mindset, and this is the first step. Developing that mindset of looking critically at everything you do. And it's a lifelong exercise, because let me give you an example. So I like processes. I also like getting rid of processes. And yet, just literally last week, I had a situation. So I discovered that one of the enterprise password managers that we use has a very nice feature. If a user downloads the password database, we can get an alert. I said, wow, cool. I leaned to somebody in my team. Mo, we have this nice feature. Can you make use of it? Can you set up a process where when this happens, start a security investigation, make sure that we don't have a data leak, put a nice process for this. And Mo looks at me and like, yeah, sure, I can do that. I'm his manager. He's supposed to do what I tell him. He doesn't. But he said, how about instead we just block the feature and we don't allow people to download it in the first place? Duh. So yes, the mindset is important, because having worked in corporations for so long, you keep thinking in processes, even when you know that should not be your first step. And yet my inclination was thinking straight about the process rather than how do we actually prevent the problem, and we don't need the process in the first place. And this is the first thing you need to learn. Start asking, do I need to be in that process? Because we have this way of thinking where in order to secure a process, we think that we have to be part of that process, which is wrong. Actually, you can secure maybe even better a process by being part of the process design. So you just tell the others how to do things securely. I mean, this is what we should be doing as security. We should be more advising and designer rather than being pure operational tasks. And you start by defining what are the goals and what are specifically the security goals for the process. You can set security goals and responsibilities then for the individual steps in the process and for each of the steps in that process. And of course, we are security, we still have accountability, we still need to maintain a level of control. Yes, you can define auditing rules or some automation rules that will give you that control. So when you get audited, you can say, yes, we can confirm that this process is done properly. But you don't need to be a step or a bottleneck in that process. And of course, when you start doing it, something else that I would like you to learn from here, document everything that you redesign, every decision that you make, any new diagram, put it on paper. Because 6 months from now, you will begin to forget why are you doing it. And you should be doing this on a regular basis. Things change. We're security. Threat landscapes change every few months. So keep looking at your processes on a regular basis. Is it still valid? Does it still solve the problems it's supposed to be doing? And let's see an actual example that I've dealt with in the past. So we were in this setup in a company where business partners needed to get access to SharePoint. Of course, if they need to get access to SharePoint, confidential data, you need to have an NDA with that party, a non-disclosure agreement, obviously. So what we're doing, the requester creates a ticket. I want to give this third party access. Nice. attach the NDA. The security team was checking, is it the right NDA? Does it have the right clauses? If it's okay, send it to operations for implementations. If not, computer says no. Hold on. Why is checking documents a security task? It's not. Scrap it. Get out. And what we did instead, we changed a few things. So first of all, you see there at the bottom, we said, it shouldn't be security doing legal reviews of NDAs. Better yet, use standard NDAs, which are pre-approved, and if you use the partner's NDA, okay, only then get it reviewed by legal, not by security. And from our side, from security, we did a couple of things. First of all, we set it by policy. Right, you, the requester, by policy, you are responsible and accountable. If you don't have an NDA with that third party and something happens, it's on you. People start paying attention when they realize that, yes, it's their ass on the line. That they're accountable for something. We also improved the tooling. We said you cannot submit a ticket if that NDA is not filled in. Okay, they can still put some other document there. They can attach their CV, but it forces them. You have to put something there, and combined with the policy, it gives a better rate of compliance. And then at the end of the process, we said, okay, to discharge our accountability responsibilities, let's put some validation in place. Let's take, on a regular basis, we take a sample of the requests, we check, were they done properly, did they have the right NDAs attached? But that takes, again, a tenth of the time that it was taking to do all the individual reviews one by one. And the other thing that we added, and this is an example of how process redesign can improve security, we realized that, right, we have a process for giving access, we don't have a process to take it out. So I said, right, every quarter, the requester gets an email to check, is this third party still valid? Do we still have a contract with them? Do they still have a legitimate need to access our data? If no, or if we don't get an answer, cut the line, we're good. So by doing process redesign, you can actually improve security while making your own life easier. And speaking of how to define the responsibilities, this is a simplified example. Of course, you can make it more complex. Sorry, I just realized that a lot of the titles are being blocked by that timer. I don't know is it possible to take the timer out by any chance? So this is about how do you define process goals and responsibilities. And by the way, the slides will be available, the recording will be available, so you don't have to memorize and read every line. This is just about the way of thinking. So you take a simple table and you describe for everybody who is part of that process, what are their responsibilities, and very importantly, what are the risks? What is the problem when they don't fulfill their responsibilities? And this is something that I learned a while ago. I was rewriting the security policies for a company, and I made one change. After each requirement, you shall do this in this way, I put a paragraph explaining the reason, the rationale. It has a tremendous positive impact on, because all of a sudden people started to understand better why certain requirements were there, and the projects were coming better prepared. Everything we had to approve for security, it got easier because people like to do the right thing when they understand the reason, when they understand the problem they're preventing. Which leads us by, when you start defining risks and threats, leads us to threat modeling. So you might ask, what does, okay, the title is, have you ever threat modeled your processes? Okay, remind me to read you the title for each slide, because it's not visible there. So have you ever threat modeled your processes? And yes, threat modeling is something typically applied in application security, but it works just as well with processes, because what is threat modeling? It's a good way to identify and to keep track of the risks and how do you mitigate this. It's also a very good step to get you into the habit of documenting things, because threat models, you have to put something on paper, okay, on a digital paper. Sorry, I'm old, I'm still thinking paper. But yeah, it gets you into the habit of documenting things. Of course, when you do threat modeling for a process, you actually have two big buckets of threats that you have to think about. You have the threats for the systems that, or the applications that you are protecting through that process, but then you have also threats in the process itself, so things that can go wrong if the process is not done properly, if it's not followed. But then it's still just threats. It still fits into the same methodology of threat modeling. And remember, another good habit that you develop when doing threat modeling, it's a living document. It gets you again into the habit of reviewing it periodically. See, is it still valid? Are the threats still relevant? Are there new threats that I might need to add into my threat model? And of course, take it easy. Keep it simple. If you are in an organization that is used to do threat modeling, by all means, apply any of the fancy threat modeling methodologies you might already be familiar with. Stride, PASTA, you name it. But threat modeling can be simple. It doesn't have to be, at least not in the beginning, very complex. For example, so this is an example for admin account approvals. Of course, a bit simplified, so I can fit it in the screen. And again, you don't have to remember each line. It's just the structure and the mindset. Just put the actors, the threats, what is the impact, or what is the risk? So if something does go wrong, if that threat is not mitigated, what can happen? And again, you see different types of threats from employees requesting access without actually needing it, to external attackers trying to get access. You just enumerate them and you make sure that you have a mitigation in place, which can be a mitigation in the process itself, or, and it's still good to write those in your threat model, it can be an external mitigation. So you might have something in your organization that already mitigates that threat. Still, write it down in your threat model for the process, so you know, okay, I don't have to duplicate that mitigation. I already have it, but I'm aware of it. And you can even make it simpler. I took the example of security code reviews. 2 columns, just make it like a simple statement narrative. These are the threats, this is how we mitigate them. Start wherever you're comfortable with, walk before you run. But this habit of documenting, putting things nicely in a structure, it's going to solve a lot of your problems and is going to put you on the path for real, proper security improvement. And of course, I promised in the abstract that we'll be talking about even more frameworks and methodologies. And actually, we already did part of that, because solving a problem starts with identifying that you have a problem. And you've already seen a little bit the mindset. But then we get to the part where we really start learning from the business. And what I've done here, again, don't need to memorize it, it's going to be available. I've taken a few of the existing process redesign frameworks and methodologies. None of them are security. None of them were invented for security, but they have been around for ages and they work. They work really, really well. I mean, if you look at Kaizen, for example, that's a methodology that was developed in Japan. I think it was not long after the Second World War. And it's a very nice methodology coming from production that is easily applicable to everything you want. And by learning these methodologies, as I mentioned in the beginning, we get closer to the business. We get to do something good without having to reinvent the wheel. And even more importantly, it gives you that common language with the business. I mean, we keep talking, we need to work closer with the business. How about we start learning their languages, their methodologies? And what I described here, so just a couple of examples. You have, at the top, you have what are the pros and cons of each methodology. also what are the types of problems that they are best solved for. Because it would be good to learn a few of those methodologies, so you have multiple tools in your toolbox, so you can use the right tool for the job. And in most companies where you work, probably you'll already find, if you talk with your learning and development team, they already have trainings and documentation for most of those methodologies. If not, you spend a few days on the internet, you can easily learn them. And I'll show you an example how easy it is to learn one of those frameworks. You'll also notice that some of them are qualitative methods, some of them are quantitative. Start with the qualitative methods, because those are easier to get rolling with, and they give you quick results. But have a plan to learn and to evolve also to the quantitative methodologies, because they have the nice advantage of being more provable. You can actually show to your management how much you have improved, which again, given the number of redundancies nowadays, might be a good idea to tell your boss, "Boss, I improved the efficiency of this process with 30%, and here are the numbers to prove it." Yeah, I know it's unfamiliar for us in security to talk that way. If we want to keep our jobs and progress, maybe that's not a bad idea. And each of these methods have nice advantages. Some of them might be familiar. Probably, if you've ever done a root cause analysis, you've used the 5 whys method, where you ask why 5 times to get to the root. Why did this happen? And then why did that happen? That 5 whys, that comes from the lean methodology. Theory of constraints, that's another nice one. It has a very simple statement. A process overall output is determined by its slowest step. So each of them has very, very nice approaches that you can use. And let's take an actual example. See how you can learn a new process redesign tool in literally less than 4 minutes. It's called the Pew chart. I love that name, Pew chart. It's actually a type of decision matrix methodology. And let's take a theoretical example. So let's say you are in a company and you have a process where approvals for new cloud deployments take too long because there are so many different approvers and each of them need to do their job in sequence. And say, okay, I want to do it better. I want to improve the process. I want to make deployments faster. Okay, so with me so far, we have a problem. We have a goal that we want to achieve. How do we get there? 2 more steps. So first, we define what are the options. So which approaches we could take. So in this case, again, hypothetical, okay, keep the current process, but just make a bit more automation between the steps, put some notifications so it moves along faster. Second option, buy or implement a workflow tool so we can do more things in parallel. And third option, well, it's modern day, so if I don't have resources to do it myself properly and with speed, let's try to outsource it. That's rarely a good option for actually doing things faster, but let's assume it is, and let's see what the method tells us. And then another thing that we need, of course, we need the criteria. We need to be able to measure which of the options are better, and this is the advantage of this method, because it breaks down a rather complex decision, okay, which of those options are better, into smaller, individually measurable criteria. And I've selected speed of approval, if it gives us a good level of compliance assurance. It has to be cheap, of course. It has to be easy to implement. You don't want to replace an existing process with something that takes 3 years to implement because you've actually added more time instead of less. And of course, you want to look, does it reduce the risk? And that's it. We have the problem, we have the options, we have the criteria. We put them in a nice table, options in the columns, the criteria in the rows, and then for each criteria and each option, we give it a score. In this methodology, it goes from minus, 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 0, plus, 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 and always put in the first column what is the current, because you want the baseline. You don't want to end up in a situation where actually all the options are negative, because then it says at least, well, I'm better keeping off the existing one. And by the way, we've just solved the problem, because when you add the results, that already tells you which option is better. So I think it was less than 4 minutes. You just learned a process redesign technique. It's that simple. Okay, some of them might take a couple of extra days, but this is how easy it works. Of course, it works easy, especially with the qualitative methods, as I explained in the beginning. Quantitative ones require you to do a little bit more work because you need to collect the data, you need to set up the processes to collect the data, but it's worth it. And speaking of metrics and measuring things, there are two frameworks that I recommend and that would come quite handy in general for being able to measure security, but especially if you're looking for metrics by which to measure your security processes. The first one is the pragmatic security metrics. I love it. It's been around for a while, but it has, first of all, it has a very nice set of predefined metrics from which to choose from. But even more importantly, it gives you a way to measure those metrics. So it works with meta metrics and basically tells you which metrics are most suitable for the problem you're solving or for the type of insight you want to give or for whatever management dashboard you want to put together. It's really a really nice one and it's not that difficult to learn. And the other one, if you're working with ISF or if your company is a member of ISF, ISF has a measuring security community for a couple of years. I've been recently at the ISF World Congress in Prague, and I spoke with a few people from that community. It's really useful. They have some really handy tools that you can use. It's, in a way, it's even easier to apply than the pragmatic security metrics. So if you want to learn how to measure security, here are two tools that you can easily use. And as we get ready to wrap things up, something more to mention about processes. Processes are not just about what we do in security. It's also about how do we interact with the rest of the organization. It's how we communicate with them. And remember, everybody likes clarity. Everybody likes to understand how things are being done. And what's the expression? How the sausage is being made. Yeah, we do like that in companies because we want to know how much is coming, what are the ways in which decisions are being made. And by making our security processes clearer, we give more clarity to the rest of the organization. And we also make it clearer to them what are they supposed to be doing. And I'll get to that more in a second. It's also well-defined processes and especially well-documented processes are a good way of telling to the others why should they be doing things in a certain way. And remember that story that I told about putting in the security policies the explanations of why should we do it this way, why is that security requirement needed. Same with processes. Keep telling them why. And actually, I've introduced something with, in my organization. I tell everybody, if we from security tell you to do something, challenge us. Do ask us, why the hell should I do that? If we're not able to tell you why, that's a signal for us in security that we might be doing something we shouldn't and we need to check our own assumptions and our own processes. We need to be able to tell why to the others. Because who likes to be told, do it because I'm security and you have to do what I say? I mean, we like to work that way. It would make our life easier. We think it would make our life easier. In reality, it doesn't, because that's not how the real world works. Unless you're physical security and you carry a big baton or a gun. Okay, but unfortunately, not all of us have that. And what do we keep saying? We keep saying security is everybody's responsibility. I haven't seen a security awareness program in the company that doesn't have that somewhere or a variation of it. Security is everybody's responsibility. But if we don't tell them what actually is that responsibility, what is their security responsibility in the processes that they're doing, how is it their responsibility? They need to understand what the responsibility is. So these were the principles that I wanted to share today. Again, it's going to be available online. Happy to connect after and to share it directly if you want. But if you want to remember just a couple of things from the session today, these are 5 takeaways that I'd like to give to you. So first of all, how to recognize problem processes. Remember the 4 horsemen of the process apocalypse? Those are 4 red flags, easy to spot. You can use them to say, that process, Sebastian told me that I should look at improving that one. The second takeaway is you don't need to be part of a process to secure it. Step out of it, design it securely, tell everybody else in that process what their security responsibilities are, but you don't have to be in the process to make it secure. The third takeaway, don't reinvent the wheel. There are so many tools and methodologies and frameworks that you can use, from threat modeling to all the process redesign techniques that I mentioned. Use them. It's going to save you time and it's going to give you better outcomes. The fourth takeaway, start easy, start with qualitative methods, but do make the effort of progressing to quantitative ones. It's going to pay off big time. You're going to thank for me later. Not when you learn them. Some of them you might spend a few extra nights because during the day you are busy doing your actual job. But eventually you will thank me. Take my word for it. And the fifth takeaway, security is a team sport. Security is not just what the security team does. Security is what the entire organization does, because we don't have enough people in security. But yeah, it is a team sport. And by having better processes, we can coordinate much better with the rest of the team. Hopefully you'll remember those. Hopefully it was useful. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, bring them on.
Thank you, Sebastian, for this wonderful presentation. Very interesting and definitely full of practical strategies for helping us to prepare for future IT audits. And that's an interesting topic.
Oh, don't get me started.
Myself, I found some good advices to implement in the organization I work for, just to prepare for IT audits. Trust me, it's quite a topic. Yeah. Questions for our distinguished speaker? Anybody? Please.
Oh, that's going to be a tough one.
No, you have the micro.
Hello.
Hey,
So I guess one of the common questions that we all have is, what are the most common misconceptions, pitfalls, traps that, we can fall into when preparing for this?
Oh, so actually the first one, the biggest misconception, and that's the one that I put right there at the top, is you don't have to be part of the process to make it secure. We in security are still very technical, we are very hands-on, and we feel the need that we have to touch everything that we do. And we feel uncomfortable letting go. It's a bit like parenting. We like to control our children because we start with the assumption that they will do something wrong. We tend to think the same way with our organizations. They will do something wrong, so I have to be there at everything they do. I have to be part of every process to make sure that they don't screw up. But that's a very inefficient way of doing things. At some point, you have to let go. You have to set rules. You have to set policies. You have to be part of defining the higher level governance rather than going there into the weeds operationally.
I'm going to follow up then.
Please.
So, thanks for falling into my trap. I mean, arguably, setting the right policies is definitely the way to go. In my opinion, compliance and security compliance is one of the more underrated departments in an organization. How does one efficiently communicate and manage that everything is compliant in the organization? So sure, I can define the policies, right? But how do I know that they're accepted, acknowledged, and implemented across the entire organization?
So you have to do it in multiple ways. And actually, there is the saying, if you want something to stick, say it 5 times via 5 different channels. So yeah, it starts with communicate the policies, make them aware. But then you have other tools, and some of them are quite familiar to us in security. Taking a random one, incident simulations. when you do incident simulations, it's actually a good opportunity to tell the organization what could go wrong if you don't follow the policies, because you actually are in scenario. Oh, this happened. Oh, by the way, that person gave access without being allowed to. That is one tool. Another tool which I found even more effective than I thought it's going to be, talking about incidents. So we actually got my team into the habit of presenting to the rest of the organization, of course, anonymized, that's fine. But these are incidents that happened, some of them outside, some of them within the organization. And people realize, oh, these are not just things that I'm reading about in the newspaper or in social media. These are things that are happening in our company. So bring the risk closer to home. And then another one, and I mentioned it in one of the slides, it doesn't mean that we completely take our hands off. So we still have controls to check, but we do it more at the end of the process from the governance, even going to the risk and compliance part, rather than being in the weeds.
Okay, then very quickly. So accidentally, I forgot to invite Maricica from marketing to the latest tabletop. How do I make sure that she actually is aware of the policies that we have?
Security awareness, company. Have a coffee with Maricica from marketing. Again, something that it was a learning curve for me as well. I'm an introvert techie. I don't go out to meet people. But when I started to take that step and actually, oh, can we have a coffee at the office, not outside? Let's keep it HR safe. But yeah, really talk with people, have conversation, and also something that you can do in all the conversations and also in incident simulations. Listen first. Again, we're security, we like to tell other people what to do and how to do it. We need to learn how to pause more and to listen. Like if we speak with Maricica from marketing, we should ask her, so what are your concerns? What are you worried about? What happens when something goes wrong in your area? Listen to that first and then link it to something from security. It's like Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand and then to be understood.
Please remember when you have your coffee with Maricica to have documented the discussion and have a signature somewhere, just to keep legal and compliance happy after.
Yeah, let's keep it HR safe, sure.
Big thank you. Other questions? I guess not. Big thank you for this wonderful presentation.